Hmm. Okay. As TNG episodes go, this is one of those that is super, super dramatic and something that it has potential for a TTRPG. But it's one of those things where, hmm, you need to carefully choose the angle you present the incident from to your players. Because, well, I'll have to explain that as we go along. So, first off, is a overzealous Starfleet admiral. No, this is actually oversimplistic. Nora Sati is a retired admiral, not an active admiral. She's currently working with what is ostensibly civilian oversight of the of Starfleet, and not star people who are currently active in Starfleet. Although, as a retired admiral, this kind of sort of means that she's still helping her friends out to a certain extent, but the conflict of interest is there, but it's somewhat minimized by the fact that she doesn't have an active command. And, anyways, yeah, Nora Sadie, one of the most controversial characters they ever introduced into Starfleet because she's introduced as an antagonist who is trying to do the right thing and sees Picard as an obstacle to her doing the right thing. And that got super spicy. And that's part of the reason why I say you need to approach this very, very carefully, is because the fact that you don't want to portray your players as the bad guys and actually tell them that oh yeah, you guys are actually the bad guys. Unless, they're okay. This is the sort of thing you could spring on your players if your players went a little too murder hobo in one of their previous sessions, as a way to, hold them accountable for their actions. Or, well, that's actually an idea that would be a different angle than what was used in this episode. This episode, the angle was that she's actually investigating due to the realization that the Romulan Star Empire has spies in the Federation, and she doesn't know who they are. And Nora Sati comes to the Enterprise because something out of the ordinary happened on board the Enterprise. That's actually just one of many places that she has gone, investigating, trying to hunt down Romulan spies. Why? Well, okay. In the episode Data's Day, we have the Romulan Admiral Mindak, who shows up to do a diplomatic uh, discussion with Ambassador T'Pel. But when Ambassador T'Pel transports over to the Devoris, she apparently dies. And oh no, what happened to the ambassador? Yeah, it turns out that T'Pel was really Sealock, and that no, actually, Sealock is not going to come back. And if you disagree with this, you can get shot at by, I think it was 4 Daredexes. Because remember, this guy's an admiral, not a captain. He's an admiral, and he brought a small fleet, most of which stayed cloaked until Picard um, had strong words for T'Pel's seeming betrayal of the Federation. Well, yeah. Anyways, that incident is part of the reason why Nora Sati is going around trying to find Romulan spies. Because, as I mentioned when discussing that episode flat out tells us that yes, actually, there are Romulan spies hiding in the Federation. A lot of them. And that scares the Federation Admiralty. Nora Sati gets tasked with this because of the fact that she is someone who, because of the fact that she's retired and doesn't have an active command, she can devote all of her time and resources to doing the investigation and doesn't need to balance, running a command with doing an investigation. She's full on doing an investigation. So, Sati comes to the Enterprise because a dilithium chamber hatch fails and they have a explosion due to that. People come to the conclusion that there um, are spies and they think that they're related to the Romulans. Here's the thing. This is an episode where a lot of the episode is actually red herrings. The dilithium chamber hatch explosion. Turns out that it was a manufacturing defect, that the people who made the hatch that was put into the Enterprise had actually made a defective hatch, and that the failure was something subtle enough that it got missed by the people doing quality control. This guy, Jadan, is actually a traitor and a spy. Uh, but he had nothing to do with the dilithium chamber hatch explosion. It's just a coincidence he happened to be on the ship at the same time. So, when Jadan denies any involvement with the dilithium chamber hatch explosion, he's telling the truth. Nora Sati and her assistants come aboard the ship, trying to find people who they think might possibly have something to do with uh, a spy on board. Okay, like I mentioned with Jadan, Jadan is legitimately a spy. What is Jadan's nature of being a spy, though? Well, he's actually a Klingon giving the Romulan Star Empire information. Why? Hmm. That's an interesting a point though, because like Jadan's logic for this is that like he's here sitting wearing a Federation comm badge and something that looks very similar to a Federation uniform. Why? Because of the fact that he is working for the Federation as a geologist or exobiologist. Sorry. And the reason Simon Tarsis gets pulled into it is solely the fact that as an exobiologist, he talks to certain members of the crew, and Simon Tarsis just happened to be a guy that uh, he talked to. And yeah, anyway, though, his logic is that The Romulans are better allies for the Klingon Empire than the Federation. That's his sole logic for being a traitor. This is very similar to that thing from Star Trek, the motion, not, well, one of the Star Trek movies, where you have this guy who is a Klingon who is acting to sabotage the peace talks between the Federation and the Klingon Empire because he feels that a state of total war between or endless war between the Federation and the Klingon Empire is more befitting of warriors than making peace. This is very similar logic. Jadan doesn't like the idea of being at peace with the Federation. He feels that the Federation is going to make the Klingons into weaklings. Yes, this is after the Kittimer massacre. Jadan apparently feels like the Romulans are better allies for the Klingon Empire in spite of the Kittimer massacre, which is part of the reason why Worf basically is like, no, actually, I'm not going to help you. I'm going to throw you into the brig and then change the passcode to something no one knows. Because Worf, as someone who was left an orphan by the Kittimer massacre, has a lot of very, very strong feelings about Romulans. One side note here is that one thing that this episode kind of sort of glosses over is that, yes, the Romulan spies thing is real, but it's not an imminent danger. One of the things that they come to the conclusion here is that while Jadan was in fact stealing information to give to the Romulans, what he'd actually managed to give to the Romulans was trivial junk. His method of sn- sneaking information out was something that really didn't get result in a whole lot of information being transferred. It was so time consuming and awkward that yes, he did get, sensitive information into the wrong hands. It really wasn't much. This episode as an espionage thriller was kind of weird. Like, and that's part of the whole thing is that Nora Satie is here trying to find the truth of the matter, and well, Nora Satie is really not here to find out the truth of the matter about the uh, of the explosion that occurred on board the Enterprise. She uses the explosion as a reason to believe that there is a Romulan spy on board the Enterprise, which is technically true. Jadan was in fact a Romulan spy. He is, however, not the reason there was an explosion. And in fact, he's not even a particularly good spy. Now, admittedly, Jadan is the kind of person that you probably wouldn't immediately suspect of being a Romulan spy because of the fact that he's a Klingon. But such it is. Now, Simon Tarsus, when he joined Starfleet, he claimed to be part Vulcan. He's mostly human, so he doesn't actually act like a Vulcan. He acts like a human, but he's someone who had s- some non-human ancestry. It's actually Romulan ancestry. It's not actually Vulcan ancestry. He tells people that he's part Vulcan though, which is technically lying. However, As far as anyone can tell, that was literally the only thing that he was guilty of as a crime. It is technically a crime to lie about your ancestry when you are filling out your paperwork to join Starfleet Academy. As far as anyone can tell, that was literally the only thing that he lied about. And that was the reason why he got um, pulled into the investigation, is that the Betazoid guy sensed that he was lying about something. And thus they decided to accuse him of being a Romulan spy solely because the Betazoid guy sensed that he was lying. The Betazoid guy was not actually able to sense what he was lying about. And that is something that comes up in as a very important aspect of the episode, is that um no one in at Nora Satie's team actually had any reason to suspect that he was a spy other than the Betazoid guy sensing that he was lying about something. And the Betazoid guy had no idea what. Because one thing that often gets glossed over is that Betazoids do have the ability to read minds. They don't necessarily have the ability to know what what thoughts people are concealing, because Simon Tarsis, when he was talking about his past, he knows that calling himself a Vulcan is a lie, but he didn't think about what the truth was because he wasn't going to talk about it. And that, oh, actually, that's another interesting thing, is that Simon Tarsis is apparently enlisted. Yeah, his official rank is crewman first class. Not even an ensign. That's actually one of those things that gets glossed over a ton in uh, Star Trek, is they focus so much on the officers on the ship that they don't bother to think about the fact that there's hundreds of enlisted people on the ship doing stuff. They don't talk about that. Oh yeah, here's something that has that. Hmm. I think this is supposed to be his rank insignia. Hard to say. One of those things that got brought up so rarely. Spencer Garrett. Oh, he also played Weiss. Huh. Oh, and he's related to a guy who was in Plato's Stepchildren. Huh. Wait, who's Weiss? It doesn't really matter. Okay, Weiss was a hologram in a Voyager episode. Oh, anyway, though. So that's an interesting thing about this episode, is that while this guy is someone who would be otherwise a minor NPC that no one cares about, due to the fact that Nora Satie is trying to question his loyalty for trivial reasons, he gets pulled to the forefront of the investigation because Satie is convinced that there is someone on board the thing who's a spy. Anyways, so doing this in TTRPG, if you're just well, one is that the core aspect of this is that you need to have an established reason for the inquisitor to come to the ship. Neutron fatigue is kind of a trivial thing. I mean, having it as part of it, yeah, sure, but it's not necessarily going to be the whole thing. Oh yeah. Hmm. We don't need to worry about those guys. The Inquisitor in the who in this case would be Nora Sati, comes to the ship to investigate something that happened. And while the incident with Mindak and Sealock is a important historical detail, it is not the reason she is right here, right now. That being the whole explosion thing. That is the reason she was right here, right now. The fact that the explosion turns out to be a, a complete fluke that had absolutely nothing to do with anything related to her investigation doesn't dissuade her. And that is something that is the part of the thing that causes her to get portrayed as a villain is the fact that Picard has to go to extraordinary lengths to get her to back down because she is acting like a shark that smells blood. She's uh, seemingly has good intentions. It's just that she's kind of sort of lost objectivity for some reason or other. Actually, that's an interesting point. They don't ever explain why it is that she is acting so paranoid about Romulan spies. And this whole thing of like her going into a hysterical rant about Picard insulting her, it's one of those things where it gives you the whole feeling that she's not actually being objective about this. And as a game master, you need to decide what level of villainy you want a character like this to take because of the fact that the story won't make sense if you do the equivalent of rolling a dice to determine whether or not Nora Sati is actually right with her goals. You really need to lay out the groundwork. That's one of the like preparation things, I guess you could say. Decide whether Nora Sati is actually has a fully um, honorable motive or whether she's like off the track. One thing they don't do in this episode, they do not show her history. They talk about who she is. They talk about who her father was. They talk about how she got to where she is. What they don't do is show previous incidents in her current campaign at rooting out Romulan infiltrators. And that is something that I would personally see as essential in uh, a case like this. If I remember right, in the episode, they basically said that the previous incidents were unavailable because they had been sealed for some reason or other. Uh, and that Nora Sati was kind of sort of using a cloak of secrecy to hide whether or not her um, supposed inquest was actually producing valid results. And that she was attempting to claim her results were truthful and necessary for the security of the Federation when in reality, no one actually knew if she was right or wrong. That is something that, from an in universe perspective, is very interesting because of the fact that, well, like I mentioned earlier, she has a betazoid helping her by acting as a living lie detector, and we know that her Betazoid did not actually manage to acquire any useful information. That was a thing. Betazoid 8. I know it lists his name. He doesn't list his name in this one. Uh, oh yeah, here it is. See, here's the thing though, is that Sabin Ganestra, uh, when he is acting as an investigator in this, he actually tells Nora Satie what information he has. He is very upfront and honest about it, but Nora Satie's, what's the best way to put this? Um, Sabin is uncertain that Nora Satie is actually doing the right thing. However, he knows that she has a good cause and that he is here to support her cause, even if he's not actually certain of all of the exact details of her investigation. In part, though, this is because of the fact that he is someone who has worked with her for many years. And that is part of the reason why Satie has him as an aide is the fact that she knows him and trusts him due to the fact that she has worked with him for so long. And she kind of sort of abuses his trust in her by asking him to do things and to basically she gives him a trust me bro when he questions whether or not Simon Tarsus is actually guilty of anything. See, Ganestra, like it says here, it's like since the Tarsus was lying, saying he was desperately frightened and was covering a lie, one so big it's overwhelming him. Nah, Tarsus is solely worried that people will realize he's a Romulan. That's it. Literally the only thing. Because he's a young kid who recently joined Starfleet and is utterly terrified of the idea of an inquisitor sending him to prison. Kind of relatable. Anyway, though, I think that's enough of this. There's a lot of things you could do with the idea of having some sort of an inquisitor come to the ship and look for stuff, but you need to carefully decide what the inquisitor's purpose is. You need to decide before you um, start the thing whether the inquisitor is actually going to be barking up the right tree, as the saying goes. You need to know ahead of time whether the inquisitor is actually in the right before you have your players interacting with the inquisitor. In this case, Nora Satie was chasing ghosts because of the fact that she doesn't know where her enemy is. She doesn't know who her enemy is. She knows that there's an enemy out there, though. That's the part that she's right about. Because, as mentioned in this episode earlier, Jadan is legitimately a Romulan spy. He was on board the Enterprise, stealing information off of the Enterprise to give to the Romulans. However, that's not the focus of her efforts. She just goes all over the place trying to find to look for things because like I said earlier, she smells blood, but she doesn't really know where the blood came from. And yeah. Alrighty then. See you guys later.